Hello. So, I thought I'd show my face today. It's been quite a common theme in some of the groups that I've been in this week that a lot of people are using one-to-one resins, which are one-to-one by volume, and finding that they have extra of one part left in their bottles after they finished. And that shouldn't be the case. If you're measuring one-to-one, then regardless of what brand you're using, if it is a one-to-one by volume, then you should always have the right amount left in your bottles. And you could be the most carefulest measurer in the world, and this is one thing that was brought to my attention when I first started, is that how accurate are the measurements on your measuring cup? Like, if that is 100 ml, where's the 200? There. Is that 200 ml? Is that actually 100 ml? And then that 100 ml? What is the difference in those measurements? And it was brought to my attention, like I said, when I first started my resin journey. It wasn't something I'd ever thought of before, but it was something I then started to pay attention to. And I was always told the best method for one-to-one resin measurements is to completely ignore jugs with measurements on and to use clear plastic cups and to measure by sight the amount you need and then in another one. So what I do, if I need, say, 300 ml for the mould, I will measure in one of my trusty jugs, and it'll make you laugh, I do have a trusty jug in my kitchen that I trust with the measurements. I don't know why, but that is my trusty jug. It's the one I use to measure all of my other jugs. It could be wrong, but it tends to match a lot of the jug measurements that I do have. And if a measurement on a measuring instrument such as one of these is wrong, and these I find when you do get the cheaper Amazon ones, like you get a pack of 10 for about £6, they tend to be the ones that are wrong, and a lot of people use them, and they'll pour 100 ml in this, they'll tip that into something, they'll then pour another 100 ml in and tip it out. But what they don't realise is there's a little bit of sediment from the other bit they've already tipped in, so that's not going to give them an equal amount anyway. But 9 times out of 10, these measurements are wrong. They're not equal, especially in those cheaper ones. So it is always worth going for the little bit more expensive ones and measuring them first, because you will find that regardless of how perfect you are at measuring, it isn't always right. And you can find it, and I've bought jugs like this before now, and that's the 100 ml, that's the 200 ml. I don't know if I've just guessed that right. Yeah, there is the 200 ml. But when I've poured 200 ml out of my trusty jug into this jug, that's not been 200 ml. That's been, let's say, 180 ml or something like that. It's been out. Or I've poured to the 100 and that's been fine. I've then poured to the 200 and I find that somewhere in the middle there's a few numbers lost because I might be over or I might be under, even though the jug that I originally started with is 200. So I will send them back if they're not right. So regardless of whether it's a plastic jug like this, one of these, like I said, one of them, I measure them first so that I know if I am going to use measurements by the mil, then I make sure that I trust those measurements, because what is the point? You need an accurate ratio for your resin to cure without blushes, for it to cure correctly, so it's to its right hardness, so it's to its right heat resistance, to its right safety regulations as well. That is the biggest main thing, is it's not safe while it's curing. And yes, people will say you need to wear a mask. People will say you don't. I personally don't wear a mask, and I can't wear a mask. There are only certain brands of resin I can use in my room because I can't wear one. And, you know, regardless, make sure whatever resin, whether you choose to wear one, you choose not to, whether it's safe for you to wear one, whether it's not, that's your choice. And that is, hopefully you've taken medical advice if you can't wear a mask. But make sure that you're using the right resin for you and your room size and your setup. You don't want to be using a HYVOC resin in a small confined space where you haven't got doors that you can freely open. Lots of people will say, yes, use this resin, but wear a mask and lock yourself in the room. Keep all the doors in the room shut. Well, no. Where do you think them VOCs are going to go? If there's no circulation in that room, they're just going to stay in that room and seep underneath your doorway slowly and through the gaps in your door. Like, they will eventually get out their VOCs. They don't contain themselves into little tiny bubbles and boxes. They have to leave somewhere. So you're better off opening your doors and your windows and letting the air flow through. You know, if you've only got one door here and another door over there to your outside, you're better off opening that door and the outside door to let them go that way. Let them go out that way. Yes, they're going to seep under the door that way, but let them go that way. But anyway, not onto masks. That's just my rant. It does my head in when people say wear a mask, because not everyone can. But yeah, check your measurements, because you should always have equal measurements. And my biggest advice is scrap measuring jugs like that if you can. Go with clear plastic cups. Yes, I'm probably going to get people saying, but you can't reuse them. You absolutely can, because you just clean them out or you pull the resin out. When you're done, it's good to go again for another use. You can use these for God knows how many times. That's not clear anymore. You can see it's being used. It's being abused. It's been squashed to get the resin out. Like, I think these were like from the pound shop or something. Like, but yeah, 2 of them. Measure it to sight. Measure it to sight. What I also do when I pour, and you'll see, I don't know how well the camera's going to pick this up. But yeah, they are equal. What I do when I pour is I leave the bottle there and I let it settle, and then I wait, and then I wait with this one, and I give them about the same amount of time, because obviously you've just poured one, so it's not going to level as quickly, and obviously as the rest is still dripping down, it's going to look like less. So I give it sort of 5-10 minutes before I even mix the 2 together, because if they're not right when I put them together again, I know that's got to settle more, and that's not right either in each of the cups. So always make sure, keep your bottles together. Your bottles will always be 1-to-1. If you're pouring 1-to-1, and I've got, like I said, various different brands here that are 1-to-1, they will, can't get them in focus properly, but they will, can you see, always be equal measurements in each. And this is a new resin I tried recently in a previous video, but again, they will always be 1-to-1. If it is a 1-to-1 resin and it's by volume, you will always have 1-to-1 left if you're careful enough. Now, like I said, you could be the most careful measurer in the world when you're using the mils on your cups or the litres, but if they're not right, doesn't matter. You're going to have unequal ratios. Pour in 2 separate containers, or if you're going to do it, buy 2 identical ones from the company and pour by sight, eye level. Pour the same amount in both. Let it settle. Leave your bottles next to each other. Make sure your bottles after 5-10 minutes are both equal. And if they are, yes, good to go. Mix it into one. Use it. If it's not, you need to top it up from whichever one's missing. Because if you're pouring 1-to-1, you will always have 1-to-1 left in your bottles, regardless of whatever resin it is, you will always have 1-to-1. And like I said, someone brought it to my attention when I first started, and I think it needs to be brought to other people's attentions. Check these measurements. These are not always accurate, and they're not always right. So when you think I've got 50 and then I've got 50 of the part B, you probably haven't. You've probably got the wrong amount. So use a trusted jug. If you use this jug every single time, in fact that's got a bit of water in, I probably measured that one. I don't even know why that's got water in. I thought that was clean. But yeah, like I said, if you use the same jug every time, pick a jug. Pick one of them. Pick the biggest one you've got. Measure 500ml or whatever in one jug. Pour it in increments to the 100, to the thing, and check it against this one. Have you got what you should have used in that? Like, is it equal? You know, if you've poured 200 in this and you started with 500 in that, you'll have 300 left in here. So make sure you've got 300 left. If you haven't, that's wrong. If that's your trusty one. So what I would say is always pick a trusty jug. Measure your measurements. If they're not right, send them back. Yes, occasionally, when your bottles of resin arrived, check them. They should always be identical levels. And some people say it's because they're in gallons, some people say it's because they're in litres, or whatever. It's not. They should always be, whether it's 1.6 gallon or it's 160 litres, it should be identical in both bottles, because both of them are 1-to-1 by volume, so they should be poured from the manufacturer by volume. And most resin companies, I would assume, if they're not right when you get them, will apologise, probably even let you keep those bottles and give you new bottles, or they might say send us those back. I know I've contacted one before because the bottle was actually leaking when it arrived, and they said absolutely keep what you've got, we'll send you a new bottle. And then I had another supplier who, again, the same thing happened. One bottle arrived because, well, I don't know, I think Royal Mail had been jumping on it. But yeah, the box came absolutely battered. One was squashed, spilt everywhere. And the company said, can you please return it to us? And I was a bit like, what am I supposed to do with it? Because it's leaking everywhere. So I stuck it in a carrier bag and sent it back. They were happy with that. They replaced it for me free of charge. But yeah, if they're not right, these resin manufacturers will 100% be there to sort it out for you and will issue you with new bottles. You won't be out of pocket, because you obviously won't be. The only way you're going to be out of pocket is if you're using measurements that aren't right, and then you've got one part of A and B right, because then your resin isn't mixed properly. But yeah, double check your measurements on your measuring jugs. That is the biggest bit of advice I can give you, because that is why, and I would be 99.9% certain, if you are a careful measurer and you reckon you are pouring 1-to-1 by volume, that is why you're getting inaccurate measurements, because your jug measurements aren't right. If you're pouring into plastic cups like this and doing it by sight, there's no way they can't be right, because it should be equal in both cups. Giving it 5 minutes, it should be equal. But yeah, pour 1-to-1, 2 plastic cups would be my advice. Mix them into a third plastic cup. What I used to do, and what I still do, is mix it into that third cup, make sure I've got no streaks and lines in it, pour it into one of the other cups, mix it again, so I've got no streaks and lines into it, pour it into the third cup, mix it again so there's no streaks and lines in it, just so I'm making sure I'm getting every single last drip of resin and hardener out of both cups. And then I leave them, cure them, let it pull out, and it's all good to go. Because sometimes I do get annoyed with cleaning them, because they do get super sticky all over your hands. So yeah, I just do that for ease. Just mix it into 3 cups, give it all a good mix into each 3, tip it out of one into the other, so I know that then, yeah, each one is going to eventually harden and will work. So yeah, I hope that helps some people. Go away, go measure your jugs. Obviously, if they are all equal, great. good to go. I don't know why you're getting inaccurate measurements. I'm guessing you're not letting it settle. But like I said, if you are pouring 50 and then another 50 in the same jug with measurements, give it a few minutes to just chill out, because you will notice it's not going to massively settle, but it will settle a little bit. So it will be slightly under, so it might need topping up a little bit. But yeah, I'm more than sure if you're doing it by volume and you are using measurements, the problem you're having with your ratios and having one left over, more than one part left in your bottles, is because these aren't right. So measure these. Measure the 100, measure up to 200, measure up to 300, and if it's not right, send it back. You know, like I said, the cheaper companies, not cheaper companies at all, the cheaper brands, some of them I bought been fantastic. Measurements perfect. Some I've bought, and one was as far as 15 mil out, going from I think it was from the 100 to the 150. It was about 15 mil out. So again, that whole pack, I think I paid something like, it was like a pack like these ones. I think I paid something like $4.99 for about 10 of them. So yeah, it means to say they did go back because they were wrong. And it was like, say maybe 2 or 3 out of the pack. And I don't know whether maybe when they've put them in the mould and they've pressed them, they've not quite gone as far down. I don't know, I can't explain it. But yeah, I have found a lot of those sort of mould pressed silicone jugs are out when you do purchase them. So yeah, like I said, my advice is go away, measure your measuring jugs. If that's a thing, it is now, make it a thing. Go measure your measuring jugs. And yeah, if your measurements are out, please do drop me a comment. Please do let me know. Tell other people that I'm not just going mad. It isn't just me. That's happened to you as well. So that they are aware, and so that people far and wide can not have this problem themselves. And yeah, I hope it helps. And I hope you do end up with equal measurements in your resin next time. So thanks for watching.